My husband called me while I was visiting friends. His voice dripped with satisfaction as he delivered the blow. I'm divorcing you, and I've sold our business. I'm starting over with my new partner. He laughed, basking in his own audacity. I didn't flinch. I didn't beg. I didn't even sound surprised. Good for you, I replied, my voice calm, controlled. But when I got home, the cocky smile vanished from his face. He straightened, eyes narrowing as if seeing me for the first time. I said, I'm divorcing you, he repeated, expecting devastation. I set down my briefcase, unbuttoned my coat, and smiled. That's funny, I said, tilting my head. Because I just finished transferring our assets. I hung up the phone, my hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Ryan's laughter still echoed in my ears, the same arrogant chuckle he had used in boardrooms, during negotiations, whenever he thought he had the upper hand. 15 years of marriage had taught me one thing: Ryan was always 3 steps ahead, except when I was 5. Want to see how she dismantles his empire, piece by piece? Subscribe now. It's free, just like the justice that's coming his way. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Ryan had been announcing his grand exit, I had been sitting in our corporate lawyer's office, finalizing the documentation that would protect everything we had built together. Or rather, everything I had built. David, our attorney, had studied me carefully, his pen hovering over the stack of legal paperwork. Are you sure about this, Mrs. Harrison? He asked. I signed the last document with a flourish. I've never been more certain of anything, I said. And please, call me Sarah. The drive home felt surreal. Every mile carried a memory, late nights spent perfecting our business model, the long hours I had worked while Ryan played the charming frontman. He had never realized that behind the scenes, I was the one pulling the strings. He had never known that I kept everything, meticulous records of every transaction, every financial misstep, every time he dipped into company funds for personal luxuries. By the time I pulled into our driveway, Ryan's sports car was already there. Showtime. I stepped inside, my heels clicking against the marble floor. He was waiting in the living room, sprawled across our Italian leather sofa like a king on his throne. His new partner, Jessica, stood by the window, her red dress catching the last light of the evening sky. The smug grin on Ryan's face told me he thought this was his moment of triumph. Sarah, darling, he drawled. I believe we have some matters to discuss. I set my briefcase down on the coffee table with deliberate slowness. Yes, we do, I said smoothly. I've already spoken with our lawyers. The divorce papers will be ready tomorrow. And I found a buyer for the business. Jessica smirked. Ryan and I. That's interesting, I cut her off, pulling out a thick folder, because according to these documents, you don't have the authority to sell anything. Ryan's expression flickered, just for a second. What are you talking about? I leaned forward, my voice like silk. You see, Ryan, while you were busy being the face of Harrison Enterprises, I was quietly becoming its backbone. I spread out the papers before him, watching his eyes widen as he recognized the legal documents. As majority shareholder and co-founder, I continued, any sale would require my approval. Jessica's confidence cracked. She took a step forward, arms crossed. Ryan told me he owned controlling interest. I chuckled, shaking my head. Ryan has a habit of telling people what they want to hear. Then I turned to her, my smile sharpening. Did he also tell you about the $500,000 he embezzled last year? Or the falsified contracts with overseas suppliers? Ryan went pale. You're bluffing. I pulled out another file, tapping my manicured nails against the cover. The SEC would be very interested in these transactions. Jessica's eyes darted between us, her earlier smugness replaced by growing panic. Ryan, what is she talking about? Nothing, he snapped. But his voice had lost its edge. I smiled, a smile I had learned from him. All teeth, no warmth. The board meeting tomorrow morning should be interesting, I said casually, since I've prepared a detailed presentation about the company's financial irregularities. His jaw clenched. You wouldn't dare. I exhaled slowly. No, Ryan. I wouldn't be destroying what we built. I met his gaze, unshaken, unwavering. I'd be protecting what I built. And while Ryan had been planning his exit strategy, he had failed to notice mine. I turned to Jessica, arching a brow. By the way, how much did he promise you from the company's sale? Her face paled. She stepped back, gripping her purse as if it were a lifeline. I need to make some calls. Her heels clicked frantically against the hardwood floor as she all but ran from the room, the sharp staccato echoing in the sudden, suffocating silence. Ryan sat there, motionless. His bravado drained away, leaving behind something hollow, something uncertain. The reality of his situation was finally sinking in. I gathered my documents, exhaling slowly. I'll leave you to process this. Then, just as I reached the bottom step of the staircase, I turned back. My voice was softer now, almost pitying. You know, Ryan, the funny thing is, if you had just asked for a divorce, I would have given you a fair settlement. He looked up, and for the briefest moment, I caught a glimpse of the man I had once loved, the man I had built an empire with. Vulnerable. Uncertain. But that man was long gone. But you got greedy, I continued, my tone hardening. You thought you could take everything, and leave me with nothing. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed, his silence saying more than words ever could. The divorce papers will be ready next week. I straightened, my voice steady. My terms. And then, just before heading upstairs, I delivered the final blow. Oh, and don't bother coming to the office tomorrow. I smiled, sharp and cold. Your access has been revoked. Security has been notified. I climbed the stairs, feeling lighter than I had in years. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, damage control, PR statements, investor reassurance. But tonight? Tonight, I would savor the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, the best revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes, it's about finally claiming what was yours all along. Ryan was gone when I woke up, the front door slamming in what I imagined was his usual dramatic flourish. But I had no time to dwell on it. By 8 a.m., I was already at the World Cybersecurity Conference in San Francisco. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from concerned colleagues who had caught wind of the rumors surrounding Harrison Enterprises. Investors were on edge. The board was panicking. Ryan's little exit strategy had sent shockwaves through our industry. But they didn't know the whole story. I did. Sarah Harrison? A familiar voice cut through the chatter of the conference hall. I turned to see Marcus Chin, my former colleague from the FBI Cyber Crime Division. Didn't expect to see you here, given the circumstances, he said, studying me closely. I adjusted my conference badge and smiled. The circumstances are precisely why I'm here, Marcus. He raised a brow. Wait, don't tell me. I tapped my laptop. Remember that backdoor tracking system we developed during my consulting days? His eyes widened. No way. You didn't. I opened a program I had been refining for years. While Ryan had been playing CEO, I had been watching everything. The screen filled with streams of data. Every email. Every transaction. Every deleted file from the past 5 years. Marcus let out a low whistle. Jesus, Sarah. He never questioned why your systems were so secure, did he? I smirked. Too busy crafting his exit strategy with Jessica to notice the digital breadcrumbs they were leaving behind. And oh, what a trail they had left. Encrypted emails between Ryan and Jessica dating back 18 months. Transfer requests to offshore accounts. Doctored financial statements meant to deceive potential buyers. But the real bombshell? Jessica's background. I pulled up her file, turning my laptop toward Marcus. His expression darkened as he read through it. Corporate espionage, he muttered. Your husband really knows how to pick 'em. Jessica had been involved in 3 corporate takeovers in the last 5 years. Always the same pattern, get close to the CEO. Orchestrate a quick sale. Disappear with the assets. Only this time? She picked the wrong company. Over the next few hours, I methodically prepared data packages for key stakeholders. Pushpin board members received detailed reports of Ryan's financial manipulations. Pushpin major clients were notified of unauthorized transfer attempts. Pushpin the SEC received an anonymous tip about suspicious trading patterns. By evening, my phone was ringing nonstop. Ryan's carefully constructed house of cards was collapsing. His new ventures investors were pulling out, spooked by the sudden flood of red flags in their due diligence reports. Jessica? Vanished. Probably on to her next target, leaving Ryan to face the music alone. When I arrived at the office that night, the place was buzzing. The SEC investigators were there, combing through records. Board members huddled in corners, whispering urgently. And in the middle of it all? Ryan. His expensive suit was rumpled, his confidence shattered. The moment he spotted me, he stormed forward. What the hell did you do? He hissed. I paused, letting the moment stretch, remembering all the times he had dismissed me, undermined me, smirked at me like I was a fool. I tilted my head. I protected our company, Ryan. My voice was quiet, but the weight of it made him flinch. Something you should have thought about before trying to sell it from under me. His face twisted with anger, but before he could respond, an investigator called him into the conference room. I watched as he disappeared behind the glass doors, knowing that his reputation was already in ruins. No one trusts a CEO who can't even protect his own company's digital assets. I settled into my office, preparing for a long night ahead. Then, just as I was about to log off, a new message popped up on my screen. Unknown sender. It was routed through multiple servers. I clicked it open. Well played, Jessica. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling through my nose. She had slipped away, for now. But one thing was certain. Ryan thought he was playing the game. He never realized I was the one who built the board. I smiled, typing a quick response. Better luck next time. But maybe pick a target who doesn't know how to follow breadcrumbs. Sometimes, revenge isn't about destruction, it's about illumination. And in the digital age, there's nowhere to hide when someone knows exactly where to look. The charity board meeting at the Metropolitan Museum was in full swing, though the air buzzed with whispered conversations and furtive glances at phones. News of Harrison Enterprises' upheaval had spread through the city's elite circles like wildfire. Sarah Elizabeth Morton, head of the charity board, touched my arm gently. Perhaps we should reschedule in light of recent events. I shook my head, straightening the papers before me. On the contrary, Elizabeth. This is exactly where I need to be. I pulled out a leather-bound portfolio, one I had been compiling for 3 years. In fact, I have something the board should see. The portfolio contained more than just company records. It held a meticulously documented history of every questionable deal, every manipulated contract, and every seemingly harmless meeting between Ryan and Jessica, which were anything but business-related. But more importantly, it contained something far more sinister. A pattern of systematic financial manipulation that stretched across multiple companies. I turned the pages, addressing the stunned board members. These documents show a connection between Ryan's activities and several failed corporate takeovers in the past 5 years. The pattern is always the same: rapid acquisition, asset stripping, and abandonment. Silence fell over the room. I had spent years quietly observing, building strategic relationships, and gathering evidence. Ryan and Jessica weren't just planning to sell our company, they were part of a larger scheme, one designed to destroy it from within. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus at the FBI Cybercrime Division. International alerts are active. Their accounts are being monitored. Perfect timing. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, setting the portfolio down, I've already shared this information with the relevant authorities. But I wanted this board to understand why Harrison Enterprises will be undergoing some significant changes in the coming weeks. As if on cue, my assistant texted. Interpol just flagged suspicious transactions from Mr. Harrison's private account to a bank in the Cayman Islands. The pieces were falling into place like a perfectly orchestrated symphony. While Ryan had been plotting his grand escape, I had been building a network of allies, regulatory officials, financial watchdogs, and industry leaders, all watching and waiting for exactly this moment. Sarah Elizabeth's voice was quiet but firm. How long have you known about this? I met her gaze. Long enough to ensure that when the truth came out, it would be undeniable. I closed the portfolio. Ryan always underestimated the power of patience. He thought business was about quick wins and faster exits. But some of us play the long game. By evening, the news had broken internationally. Headlines screamed about potential money laundering, corporate espionage, and fraud. Financial watchdogs across 3 continents had launched full-scale investigations into the web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and insider deals Ryan had meticulously crafted over the years. Back at the office, I found him waiting. In my parking spot. His tailored suit was gone, replaced by casual wear that did little to hide the desperation in his posture. "You've destroyed everything," he spat. "Years of work. All our connections." I folded my arms. "No, Ryan. I've protected everything. The company. Our employees. Our legitimate clients. The only thing I've destroyed is your ability to do this to someone else." His face contorted. Jessica was right. We should have moved faster. Taking control before. Before what? I interrupted, tilting my head. Before I could reveal that your new partner has been under investigation for corporate fraud in 3 countries? Or before your offshore accounts were frozen? The color drained from his face. "What did you say about the accounts?" I checked my watch. "Oh, that should be happening right about now. Interpol doesn't mess around with international financial crimes." As if to confirm my words, his phone buzzed. From his expression, I knew it wasn't good news. He answered, stepping away, running a hand through his hair in that nervous gesture I knew so well. I watched him go, not with triumph, but with a quiet satisfaction. Because this was never just about revenge. It was about justice. About ensuring patterns of destruction couldn't continue unchecked. The next morning found me in Zurich. The crisp Swiss air was a stark contrast to the chaos back home. While Ryan was dealing with Interpol, I had a different meeting, one that would unravel the last threads of his deception. Hans Weber, my contact at the International Financial Commission, greeted me with characteristic Swiss precision. "Mrs. Harrison, your timing is impeccable. The accounts you flagged have shown significant activity in the past 24 hours. I set my laptop on his immaculate desk, pulling up the forensic accounting software I had developed over years of quiet observation. "They're panicking." Hans and I watched as the digital breadcrumbs unraveled a maze of shell companies. Ryan had been clever. But not clever enough. His fatal flaw was assuming no one would look beyond the surface, that no one would connect the dots. "Here." I pointed to a cluster of transactions. Every 3rd Friday, exactly 2.3% of our company's gross profits would vanish into what looked like operational costs. But follow the money. Hans leaned forward, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. He traced the path. It goes through 7 different entities before landing in very clever. A series of cryptocurrency wallets. And from there, I continued, typing rapidly, into these offshore accounts. Each registered to companies that don't technically exist. The screen filled with transaction records. A digital map of betrayal that stretched across continents. Ryan hadn't just been planning to sell our company. He had been systematically draining it for years, building a secret fortune he thought no one would ever find. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus at the FBI. Global asset freeze initiated. All identified accounts locked. I exhaled slowly. Ryan had always thought he was the smartest person in the room. Turns out, he had just never been in the right room. I allowed myself a small smile. Now, Hans, watch what happens when we trigger the regulatory alerts. With a few keystrokes, I transmitted the compiled evidence to financial authorities in 12 countries simultaneously. The reaction was immediate. Warning flags erupted across the global banking network as security algorithms detected the patterns we had uncovered. Hans leaned back, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Harrison," he said slowly, his voice edged with admiration. "This is comprehensive. You've been planning this for quite some time." Since the day I noticed the first discrepancy, I admitted. Ryan thought his background in traditional banking made him untouchable. He never understood that in today's world, every digital transaction leaves a fingerprint. Before Hans could respond, my phone rang. "Jessica." I put it on speaker. "You knew," she said without preamble, her voice a cold whisper. "You knew all along. About the accounts in Geneva, Malta, Singapore, and those clever little trusts in the Caymans." I kept my tone measured. "Tell Ryan his crypto wallets aren't as anonymous as he thought." She let out a hollow laugh. "He can't tell me anything right now. He's in a meeting with federal investigators." How unfortunate. Across the desk, Hans was already making notes. I glanced at him before continuing. "You might want to schedule a similar meeting. Your trading patterns over the last 18 months have raised some interesting questions." The line went dead. Hans raised an eyebrow. "Let her run," I said, closing my laptop. "Every account she touches, every transaction she makes, will only strengthen our case." By evening, the financial world was ablaze. Headlines screamed of hidden assets, international fraud, and frozen accounts. Ryan's carefully constructed web of shell companies was collapsing like dominoes, each one exposing more deception than the last. Back in my hotel room, I received an encrypted message from our company's board. "Emergency meeting tomorrow. Full audit approved. New security protocols in place." I poured myself a glass of Swiss wine, watching the lights of Zurich shimmer below. Ryan had always mocked my attention to detail, my insistence on understanding every facet of our financial operations. "You're wasting your time," he'd say. "That's what accountants are for." But forensic accounting isn't just about numbers, it's about patterns. It's about the story money tells when it moves in the shadows. And tonight, that story had become his undoing. My phone vibrated one last time, a message from Hans. "Authorities have locked down all identified assets. Total amount frozen, 47.3 million euros. I raised my glass to the city lights. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes, it's about recovery. About taking back what they thought they had already stolen, the morning sun was breaking over Zurich's skyline when my phone erupted with urgent messages. Maxwell Industries, our biggest client, was calling an emergency meeting. Perfect timing. I was already on my way to the airport. 6 hours later, I strode into Maxwell Company's headquarters in Manhattan, shaking off the jet lag just in time to see Victoria Chin's expression. "Have you seen the news?" she asked, leading me into the conference room. I settled into my chair, scanning the faces of several other major clients around the table. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a statement. "About Ryan's frozen assets," I said smoothly, "or about Jessica's disappearance?" Victoria's lips curved into a knowing smile. "About the fact that Harrison Enterprises was never actually for sale, despite what certain parties have been claiming." I brought up our client portfolio on my tablet. "That's exactly why I wanted to meet with all of you today. Ryan wasn't just planning to sell the company, he was actively undermining our client relationships." Silence fell over the room as I displayed the emails, correspondence that showed Ryan's desperate attempts to poach our top clients for his new venture. The numbers he'd promised were inflated, the projections impossible. Worst of all, he had manipulated internal data to make our company's performance seem weaker than it was. James Morrison, our second largest client, exhaled sharply. "He approached me last week. The numbers seemed too good to be true. Now I know why." "Because they were fabricated," I confirmed, swiping to the next screen. "Here are our actual performance metrics for the past 5 years. Notice the difference." Victoria leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Your real numbers are better than what he was showing." I allowed myself the smallest smirk. Ryan always believed in underselling and over-delivering to himself. He was planning to take our client list to his new venture, promising impossible returns based on pure fiction. The meeting stretched on for hours as we combed through contracts, deliverables, and future projects. By the end of it, not only had we retained every client, several had committed to expanding their contracts. As the others filed out, Victoria pulled me aside. "We never trusted Ryan. We trusted you." My phone buzzed. "Authorities, Mr. Harrison spotted attempting to access frozen accounts in Singapore. Local authorities notified." I smiled grimly. "Would you believe me if I said I knew this day would come?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because every client contract has a secret clause." I slipped my tablet back into my bag. One that Ryan never bothered to read. Her eyes widened. "The loyalty provision," I continued. "In the event of any unauthorized attempt to transfer client relationships, all contracts automatically renew with the original company leadership." I gathered my papers. Ryan thought he was stealing our client list. He didn't realize our clients had already chosen their side. Back at the office, the exodus had begun. Ryan's supporters, the few who remained, were clearing out their desks. Those who stayed, they were the ones who had known all along who really ran things. My assistant intercepted me in the hallway. "Mr. Harrison attempted to access the client database." I didn't even break stride. "And?" "All attempts blocked." I walked through the office, stopping at each department, reassuring teams, and outlining the company's future. The fear in their eyes faded, replaced by something stronger, determination. "Mrs. Harrison." A young analyst caught up to me. "The clients are asking about the innovation pipeline you mentioned. They want to know if we're still on track." I smiled, remembering all the projects Ryan had dismissed as unnecessary expenses. "Tell them Phase 1 launches next week. Right on schedule." As the day wound down, a final message arrived, this time from Jessica. Routed through an anonymous server. "You never needed him, did you?" I typed back. "No. But he needed our clients. Good luck finding new ones with your reputation." Looking out over the city skyline, I felt something lift. The client list had never just been names in a database, it was a network of trust, of competence, of genuine value. Something Ryan never understood. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new growth. But for now, I savored one simple truth. Loyalty isn't bought. It isn't stolen. It's earned, one relationship at a time. And that was something Ryan could never take away. I pulled out my own set of records, the real ones, meticulously maintained and notarized. Ryan never thought anyone would scrutinize the financial statements that deeply. But the beauty of paper trails is their permanence. While he had been busy manipulating digital records, I had been quietly documenting everything the old-fashioned way. Every falsified report had its genuine counterpart. Every doctored tax form had its authentic twin. My phone lit up with a message from our tax attorney. "IRS Special Investigation Unit wants to meet tomorrow. They're particularly interested in the offshore consulting fees." I smiled, remembering Ryan's so-called creative accounting. He had called them strategic international partnerships, shell companies that existed only on paper, billing millions for services never rendered. "Send me everything you found," the auditor was saying. "The SEC is particularly interested in the pattern of tax evasion." I finished compiling the files. Combined with the systematic falsification of corporate records, I know exactly how he did it. The evidence was damning: years of fraudulent tax returns, fabricated business expenses, and hidden income streams, all documented in perfect detail. Ryan had been so focused on covering his digital tracks that he had forgotten about the paper ones. A knock on the archive door. My assistant stepped in. "Mrs. Harrison, the regulatory compliance team is here." And Mr. Harrison's lawyer called. "Let me guess, they want to negotiate." She nodded. "They're offering to withdraw all claims to the company in exchange for—" "No deals," I interrupted, pulling out another stack of documents. "Send these to the SEC immediately. Priority courier." These weren't just any papers. They were the smoking gun. Every fraudulent transaction had left a trace, every false statement a contradiction. And then there was Ryan's new partner, his criminal history buried in regulatory filings from 3 different countries. My phone buzzed again. "Marcus from the FBI. Your documentation is extraordinary. How long have you been keeping these records?" "Since the day he first adjusted our quarterly earnings," I replied. "Some people keep diary entries. I keep paper trails. The next morning, the headlines were brutal. Harrison Enterprises faces federal investigation. Tax fraud scheme exposed. Corporate records reveal years of deception. Ryan's lawyer was waiting in my office, looking considerably less confident than usual. "Mrs. Harrison, my client is willing to." I held up my hand and slid a thick folder across the desk. These are the original documents showing systematic tax evasion over the past 5 years. The authorities already have copies. His face paled as he flipped through the pages. This would mean federal charges. Yes. But that's not my concern anymore. I stood, gathering my things for the SEC meeting. Your client made his choices. Now he can face the consequences. As I left for the federal building, my phone lit up one last time, a message from Jessica, probably sent from somewhere beyond extradition. I should have checked the paper records. Yes, I typed back. You should have. The SEC investigators were thorough, professional, and clearly impressed by the documentation I had maintained. Every question they asked, I had the paper to back up my answers. Every allegation they raised, I had the evidence to support. By evening, the wheels of justice were turning at full speed. Ryan's assets were frozen, his passport flagged, his empire crumbling under the weight of his own deceptions. Back in the archive room, I ran my hand over the rows of filed documents. Ryan had always laughed at my insistence on keeping paper records in a digital age. "Nobody does that anymore," he'd say. But paper doesn't lie. It doesn't crash. It doesn't get hacked. It doesn't disappear with a click. And most importantly, it tells stories, stories of greed, deception, and, ultimately, justice. While the SEC was combing through our paper trail, I found myself at the annual Global Business Summit, an event Ryan had always dominated with his charisma. This year, however, the whispers that followed me through the convention center had a different tone. Sarah Harrison. Bernard Walsh, CEO of our largest competitor, intercepted me by the keynote stage. "I believe we have some matters to discuss." I checked my phone. Another update from the authorities about Ryan's failed attempts to access frozen accounts. "Indeed we do, Bernard. Particularly about those merger talks Ryan initiated last month." His eyebrows shot up. "How did you know about the confidential meetings?" I led him to a quiet corner. "The same way I know about the falsified projections he showed you." "Tell me, did the numbers seem a bit too perfect?" Bernard's expression shifted from surprise to understanding. "We thought something was off, the growth predictions, the market share calculations." "All fabricated," I confirmed, pulling up the real data on my tablet. But here's what's interesting. While Ryan was trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover through you, he was feeding similar false information to every major player in the industry. The summit became my war room. One by one, I met with industry leaders, sharing the truth behind Ryan's elaborate scheme. He hadn't just planned to sell our company, he had been playing the entire industry against itself, creating a bidding war based on lies. My phone buzzed. A message from Victoria Chin. "Market analysts are starting to connect the dots. Ryan's new venture stock is in free fall." Perfect timing. I had just finished briefing the Industry Ethics Committee when the news broke. Market manipulation scheme exposed, multiple companies targeted. Bernard caught up with me again as I was leaving the main hall. The industry coalition wants to issue a joint statement. We need to present a united front. I smiled, remembering all the times Ryan had dismissed industry cooperation as weakness. Send me the draft. And Bernard, check your merger documentation. Page 23 might interest you. Back at my hotel room, the pieces were falling into place. Industry support was crystallizing, not around Ryan's promises of quick profits, but around the truth and the need to protect the market from similar schemes. My assistant's message flashed on screen. Competitors are withdrawing from all negotiations initiated by Mr. Harrison. His new venture's funding is collapsing. I opened my laptop, connecting to a secure video call with our board. The screen filled with familiar faces, all wearing expressions of grim satisfaction. The industry response has been unanimous. I reported that every major player had agreed to share information about Ryan's approaches. The pattern was clear: he was setting up a massive market manipulation scheme. Jessica, one of the board members, asked, "Is he currently being investigated?" "Yes," I replied. "Market regulators across 3 countries are on his trail." I pulled up her file. This wasn't her first attempt at industry-wide manipulation. Our strategy was working perfectly. By exposing Ryan's schemes to the entire industry, we weren't just protecting our company, we were inoculating the entire market against his tactics. As the day ended, a final message came through from Ryan himself: "You've turned everyone against me." "No," I typed back. "You did that yourself. I just showed them the truth." Standing on my hotel balcony, I reflected on Ryan's greatest flaw: he never understood the real strength of business relationships. He saw every interaction as a transaction, every connection as leverage. But in this industry, reputation and trust were everything. By trying to pit everyone against each other, he had only succeeded in uniting them against himself. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, new alliances, and stronger industry safeguards. But for now, I savored the knowledge that sometimes, the best revenge isn't about destroying someone's plans, it's about showing the world exactly who they are. My phone lit up with a message from the Industry Ethics Committee: new protocols being implemented across the sector. "Thank you for bringing this to light." I smiled, raising my coffee cup to the dawn. Ryan's biggest mistake wasn't betraying me, it was underestimating the power of industry solidarity. And that was a mistake he would never have the chance to make again. Dawn had barely broken over the city when I stepped into the SEC's Manhattan office. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. While Ryan was dealing with industry fallout, I was about to unleash the final phase of his undoing. Mrs. Harrison, Agent Thompson greeted me, leading me through security. "We've reviewed the preliminary evidence you provided. It's extensive." I placed my briefcase on the conference room table and extracted a series of encrypted drives. "What you've seen is just the surface. These contain 5 years of documented corporate fraud, including undeniable evidence of systematic market manipulation." The room was filled with federal investigators, each armed with laptops and grim expressions. As I walked them through the evidence, their professional curiosity shifted to stunned disbelief. "He really thought he could get away with this," one investigator murmured, scrolling through transaction records. "He thought no one was watching," I corrected. "But I've been gathering evidence since the first red flag appeared." My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus at the FBI, International Task Force assembled. "Ready when you are." The timing was orchestrated perfectly. As I presented evidence to the SEC, similar briefings were happening at regulatory agencies across 3 continents. Every fraudulent transaction, every manipulated report, every secret deal, all exposed simultaneously. "This goes beyond corporate fraud," Agent Thompson said, studying a particularly damning series of documents. "We're looking at potential RICO charges." I nodded, recalling how Ryan had dismissed compliance meetings as bureaucratic nonsense. "Check the offshore accounts linked to these shell companies," I said. "You'll find connections to some very interesting parties." The evidence was irrefutable: years of witness statements, recorded conversations, and documented violations, all meticulously compiled and cross-referenced. Ryan hadn't just broken corporate laws, he had created an entire shadow operation. An urgent message flashed on my screen: "Federal agents just arrived at Mr. Harrison's new office." Perfect. I pulled up the final piece of evidence, the smoking gun that would seal his fate. This is the original recording of Ryan discussing his plans with Jessica. Notice the date: 6 months before he tried to sell the company. The room fell silent as the audio played. Ryan's voice, casual and arrogant, outlined his scheme to defraud investors, manipulate markets, and escape with millions. It was the kind of evidence prosecutors dream about. Agent Thompson leaned forward. "You understand that as a whistleblower, you're entitled to certain protections." "I'm not interested in protection," I interrupted, sliding another file across the table. "I'm interested in justice. And these documents prove that Ryan's operation extends far beyond our company." By afternoon, news channels were running breaking stories about a major corporate fraud investigation. Ryan's name was plastered across financial networks, his empire crumbling in real time. A message from Victoria Chin lit up my phone: "Just saw the news. The entire business community is in shock." I smiled grimly, watching federal agents exit the building with boxes of evidence. The shock's only beginning. Wait until they see what's in those records. Back at the office, employees gathered in groups, watching the news unfold. They had known something was wrong, but the scale of Ryan's deception was staggering. My final task of the day was a video call with the federal prosecutor. "The case is solid," she assured me. "Multiple charges, multiple jurisdictions. He's not walking away from this." As night fell, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from Jessica, probably from some non-extradition country. "You were recording everything, weren't you?" "Not everything," I replied. "Just the important parts, like the day you both planned to destroy everything we built." Looking out over the city, I thought about all the nights I'd spent gathering evidence, building my case, waiting for the right moment. Ryan had always said I was too cautious, too focused on details. But sometimes, the details are what matter most. Sometimes, the truth just needs a voice willing to speak it. Tomorrow would bring indictments, arrests, and the beginning of a long legal process. But for now, I took satisfaction in knowing that justice doesn't always require revenge. Sometimes, it just requires courage, patience, and the willingness to stand up and blow the whistle.